We will now head into a very exciting segment of the program, our Singapore Maritime Lecture, in conversation with the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization. And at this point, it brings me great pleasure to be inviting up on stage Ambassador Mary Seet Cheng, non-resident High Commissioner to the Republic of Fiji and non-resident Ambassador to the Pacific Islands Forum, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to introduce Mr. Arsenio Dominguez. Ambassador Mary, please.
Welcome back to the last session of this opening ceremony. As usual, we save the best for last. And it's my great pleasure to introduce this year's speaker at our Singapore Maritime Lecture. I first met Arsenio all of 20 years ago when he first sauntered into an IMO meeting in London as the alternate PR of Panama to the IMO. I was then with the Maritime Port Authority and attending IMO Council meetings. I remember him being among the select guests at a small dinner party that then IMO SG Metropolis held for his friends during IMO Council Week. So this young man very quickly became part of the inner circle of IMO delegates and one of Metropolis' favorite delegates. So I knew very early on that this man was destined for bigger things. He represented Panama at the IMO as permanent representative till 2017. Then joined the IMO Secretariat, first as Chief of Staff to SG Lim Ketak, then progressed to be Director of the important Marine Environment Division. While I knew this man was heading for the top job, what distinguished him for me was how patiently he bid his time. He spent 20 years, from 2004 to 2024, honing his expertise, knowledge, and know-how through the evolving challenges and issues at the IMO. He took his time to gather his supporters and fans and gain the trust of IMO delegates. And here he is at his destination, the 10th IMO SG. Still only all of 53 years old. So the moral of this story to young executives out there is to take your time, gather your knowledge and skills, establish your network, so when you get to the top job, you will be comfortable, confident, and prepared to enjoy it when you get there. And I'm sure Arsenio will. So I have been asked to say that Arsenio will speak for 15 minutes on what his challenges and priorities are at the IMO and what he personally wants to achieve going forward. And we will have 45 minutes of Q&A after. So welcome the Secretary General IMO, Arsenio. Vamos!
Yes. Good morning. Minister, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's a real pleasure being here today. It's been probably too long since my last visit to Singapore. embarrassingly have to acknowledge that I think it's over 12 years since I actually came here. But it remains as vibrant and active, in particular when it comes to shipping, as usual. And something that I want to also thank Singapore for is the theme for the Singapore Maritime Week, because it focuses on actions, the actions meeting the ambitions. And that's what the shipping sector should be all about. We already have in front of us the ambitions when it comes to decarbonization, which is one of the key topics of this Maritime Week. And when we started the Marine Environmental Protection Committee meeting in July last year, there were a lot of expectations whether IMO was going to meet those ambitions. And we actually did. We adopted a strategy that has a clear pathway towards the decarbonization of the sector. And that's something that not everybody has been able to achieve. And we should be proud of that commitment that we have. But of course, that's just the beginning of the story. And this is where we are right now at the organization. And this is why I'm confident and positive that we will continue to take actions in order to meet those goals. Currently, we're carrying out the assessment, very important assessment, of the impact of the measures that will be introduced next year, as it was agreed on a very ambitious and challenging timetable, in order to have the technical measures as well as the economic measures that are going to help this transition. And I'll continue to use that word transition, because that's where we are. We need new technologies, we need new fuels, we need new skills for the seafarers, and we also need digitalization, because they all work together in order to take us there. Apart from that assessment, we're also developing the measures. And it's with great pleasure that I can announce that the last session of the MEPC, the Marine Environment Protection Committee, just over a month ago, agreed already on the draft figurative text in order to adopt these measures. And that is progress. And this is what we need to focus as well, and acknowledge the progress that we make. And something that I will continue to campaign for is that this is a global industry, and it requires global regulations. We all call for harmonized implementations, for a level playing field. We only will get that if we continue to work, all 176 member states, industry, NGOs and IGOs, together at IMO. And that's where we have always been successful. We acknowledge the challenges that we all face, because it will be a challenging process, but there are opportunities. And it's those actions that we're discussing this week that are going to take us into these opportunities. I'll take the example of the speech of the minister this morning, and how the port infrastructure and trade in Singapore continues to grow. And that is being a role model for others to follow. But it's also the continuous expressions that we have in cooperation and collaboration. But let's move beyond those words into the actions. And we see how early today we have the agreement or the letter of intent for the Maritime Energy Training Facility. That's another step forward already on addressing the challenges that the decarbonization agenda brings to us. Then in the previous panel, you heard about cost. And of course, there will be a cost implication. We are changing, we are transitioning. But saving the environment, it's something that we all have to contribute. And that involves also civil society. Because one of the main examples that was provided there is how we are all used to just click online on something that we want to purchase, and it's going to arrive the following day. That has a cost, because most things are transported by sea. And this is the acknowledgement that we all need to carry forward. I need you to be the role models in defending the maritime industry, the steps that we continue to make, and not just to be recognized when there's something going wrong, and how we always come together in order to address those challenges. And in that respect, I'll take this moment to appreciate, in particular, seafarers and the danger they are now facing due to geopolitical instability around the world, particularly in the Red Sea, and the accidents that have taken place already. And we already have casualties as well. But we'll continue to address them as an industry. And we're looking of how to engage with all the member states around the region. IMO is working in enhancing training and capacity building in the countries in the region, as well as working with those that are providing additional assistance for ships to operate. And again, it brings an additional challenge. Now we're taking a longer route around the Cape of Good Hope in order to safeguard the very important life of seafarers, as well as the safety of the ships, and guaranteeing that trade continues to flow for everyone's benefit in this planet. What it's also doing is forcing the industry to emit more GHG because of the longer route that we have to take. But we've been forced to do that. Let's remind us that we are actually working very positively and as quickly as it is necessary, and that we're capable of doing it in order to address all member states. And I can guarantee to you that we will continue to listen to the concerns of the member states, to work with them in relation to the opportunities that will arise, and to meet the very challenging timetable of introducing the measures in 2025 with entry into force in 2027 in order to meet the first goal, which is in the year 2030, of reducing emissions by 20, aiming to 30%, and an upscale of 5% at least of renewable fuels. Many of you will say that 2030 is around the corner. For me, we still have over 6 years to meet those commitments. Let's remain positive that we're actually going to do it, just as we were positive last year that we will set the ambitions. Digitalization is another topic that is quite relevant and important for us, because as we progress with the new autonomous ships, they will assist us also to address different challenges like decarbonization and the shortage of seafarers. But let me highlight one thing. When we talk about digitalization, and in particular autonomous shipping, my message is not to be taken that we are displacing the workforce and that we will not have seafarers. On the contrary, seafarers will always be required, will be relevant. Their role is paramount in shipping. But at the same time, we need to work with the governments in order to transition those jobs inland, because the experience and the expertise will be required to make it effective. Now, when you look at both digitalization and decarbonization, then we go back to the areas of the actions. But let's not forget all the other work that carries out the International Maritime Organization to support this transition. From seafarers training, from other areas of the environment that we need to protect, like reducing noise pollution or transboundary pollutions from invasive species, as well as cyber risk. This is not new to the agenda of the organization. It's been there before. We have high-level guidelines, and I can confirm that it's already on the agenda of the Maritime Safety Committee, who will meet later this year, because we don't work in isolation. We continue to connect the dots in all these agendas. I look forward to the exchange that we're going to have now, and I think I'm going to stop, because it will be good to see also what questions you have. But something that I would like to say to all of you is, let's defend the shipping sector, but also let's acknowledge that there's more for us to do. I'm a full campaigner of diversity, transparency, and inclusion in this sector, and there's more there's more to be done there. We need a diverse workforce and a diverse approach in order to meet the future challenges, in order to also attract the younger generations, the ones that are going to take the work from us and continue to make progress and protect the environment and society. I look forward to changes in the industry because we have to evolve. The sector needs to adapt to the challenges that are thrown at it. We continue to be resilient, we demonstrate to be resilient, but we also need to be prepared to change. And in that change, I also want to invite you to raise a voice, to highlight all the good things that we do, and not just when we have to react, because probably some of the news that are coming out there are not what we consider positive. But use it in your favor to explain how important we are, how resilient we are, how sustainable and green we are. Because when you compare shipping right now to any mode of transport, mass transportation, we will always come on top. So work with me on this. Do not lose faith in IMO. Keep embracing shipping. And I look forward to see you and working with you for the years to come. Thank you very much.
Well, what did I tell you? 20 years of preparation. He speaks without any notes. Wonderful. Well, that was a fighting speech, yeah? Action to meet ambitions. And the fact that we are in this very important transition period where everybody has to come on board and everybody has to play their part. And I think we are all very clear that IMO has to set the international standards, and we should all try and play our role in supporting the IMO in this very important transition period. So I'm waiting for my Slido. Somebody has not delivered my Slido. Thank you. Well, I think you have talked about the importance of this transition period and how the IMO has to play the central role in all this. And of course, the key agenda item has always been, is in today's whole week, we're talking about the double Ds, the digitalization and decarbonization, and you have this important strategy that you have put in place that you have to put into action. So let's see what are the questions that come up on this particular issue of the double Ds. Oh, there are not many questions yet. So let me take the opportunity of being the moderator to ask the first question. I think with all these challenges that we face in the very complex issue of decarbonization, I'm glad to hear that you talk about the need for the seafarers to be trained and for the manpower to be brought along the way. So what are your plans in this direction? Because I've been in this maritime field for a very long time, and I agree with you, no seafarer, no shipping, no shopping. And people don't really appreciate how much the shipping sector does in giving you the everyday goods that you take for granted. So first of all, you need to raise that awareness. Second of all, you need to make sure our seafarers keep up with all the tremendous changes. And third of all, you need the companies, the governments to play their role in helping you do that. So perhaps you could answer that issue.
Thank you. And it's good that we actually start with the seafarers because they need to be recognized. It is important that we always highlight the role that they play in shipping. We continue to move forward at IMO in relation to the training of seafarers. We are currently reviewing the Watchkeeping and Training Convention for seafarers, taking into account technological development and the progress. And of course, one of the key areas that we're looking into it's also the decarbonization and the safety aspects that we've been considering already for a few years since we started this transition. But yes, there's a need for the member states, for the countries and the companies to continue to enhance and support the seafarers. And this is by providing the necessary training and assistance for them. Also, we need to look into the aspects that are up and coming, like harassment and sexual harassment on board the ships, the health and well-being on the seafarers, mental health in particular. It is very challenging to attract a future workforce to seafaring when we are actually facing the challenges like the Red Sea or the Black Sea. It doesn't paint the best picture. And then if we look back during the COVID pandemic, we were the only mode of transport that continued to operate in a detrimental manner for the seafarers. But then they don't get the recognition afterwards. They were recognized back then, but then now we continue to forget everything that they did for us. And it's when governments start outlining the national strategies and companies their investment plans do invest in people, and that includes seafarers. And that's what we continue to work as well with the International Labour Organization and how to highlight those challenges that they have. And we are already carrying out a study in relation to how to attract seafarers, what are the challenges that we have there, and how to make that workforce more diverse. But let's face it, we also need to invest, and that means economically as well with the seafarers. And part of the economic measures that we're developing at IMO would also support that transition, because the human element is being highlighted as one of the main objectives or the main principles within this transition for decarbonization.
Yeah, and in that same line, I think one of the key other conventions that are important in IMO is the STCW. And I'm aware that there is a big review that will be going on to see how all these new technologies, new changes are going to affect the need for changes in the training aspects. How will you approach this in the IMO going forward? Because it's a really, really big issue.
But we have already a work plan in order to address the challenges that technologies, and by challenges I mean because continues to evolve. And is then in this revision of the STCW convention, how we're going to introduce the necessary goal-based approach in order to allow for technology to always be able to be addressed within the regulatory framework. So it's a good opportunity to find a balance into the prescriptive approach and also the flexibility, the openness that the convention needs to provide. We have done it in other instruments. We are doing it under the Safety of Life at Sea Convention, the SOLAS Convention, that is turning 50 this year, by the way, and that's why our theme is navigating the future safety first. And then we have what we always call the early movers. And that's why I wanted to take the opportunity again to appreciate Singapore for the Maritime Energy Training Facility, because it starts bringing that experience, that expertise into the organization. Because it's with that practice that we can continue to evolve. And then, of course, as we get the implementation by key players, by the industry, by a country like Singapore, that is a big bunkering port, that it's also a big port country, as well as a big flag state, it is then can share that experience, that expertise with others, bring that to the organization in order for us to continue to move forward. But it doesn't mean that you have to always wait for the regulation. And I don't want to be misquoted. It doesn't mean that IMO is not going to regulate. It's that we have a process that we need to follow in accordance to international law. But it's plenty of opportunities for the industry, for the countries to take steps forward and bring that experience, that expertise to the organizations for all to benefit and continue to move forward as one.
Thank you. Now, going back to the double D issue, I think I have some questions here in Slido that talk about how sometimes it takes very long for regulations to come in place at the IMO, and we all understand that for 176 member countries to agree with so many different interests, that introduction of new regulations and how we decarbonize will take time. So how do you address the impatience of people who see that the IMO is too slow and therefore, maybe we need to push things along and introduce national regulations that force the pace? What is your approach to that?
IMO is not slow. No, I have to be honest. Let me say that out loud and clear. IMO is not slow. It's 176 member states. And again, we all call for level playing field and leaving no one behind. So the way to do that is with the actions. If you sit at an IMO meeting, and I'm not going to turn this into a meeting, everybody agrees on the objectives and the goals that we set. And that became very clear last year when it was highlighted as one of the biggest achievements of the organizations and we adopted a strategy. But there are also challenges and concerns, and not all member states are at the same level playing field. So we need to address those concerns. We need to see how we can better support them, sometimes directly through the organizations, sometimes bilaterally, and Singapore, among other countries, is one of those that very much supports through projects and partnerships the progress and the assistance that we provide to other member states. We also have to, without becoming very boring on this part of answering this question, we also have to recognize that there's a procedural matter that we need to address in accordance to international law. Because once we agree and set up the rules, we have to allow for the countries and the industry to prepare for it. They do start preparing in advance, but it's the areas where regulations need to go through Parliament. Additional steps and logistical arrangements need to be taken by administrations in order to comply with the regulations in full. IMO has to then prepare additional training in technical operational activities to support the member states. So we are not slow. I'll give you one example every time that we get told that we're slow, and in particular in the area of greening the sector. 2015 was when the Paris Agreement was agreed. 2018, IMO became the first UN organization to set up specific goals, not through voluntary contributions, but through mandatory regulations, because we do mandate ships to comply with specific rules in order to meet the goals. And back then, it was highlighted as a great achievement. A few years later, we were told that that was not enough. But we made an agreement in 2018 that in 5 years' time, taking into account technological development, R&D, science, and the progress made on the initial measures that we adopt, we will revise the strategy. And now, again, we are the first transport sector that is going to introduce mandatory requirements in order to meet the goal to decarbonize the shipping sector by around 2050. If that is being slow, then let's start comparing ourselves with others.
Thank you. There have been questions asked about what is the alternative fuel. And I think the ministers who were in the earlier panel had avoided to answer that question. So would you be brave enough to predict what the alternative fuels might be?
I can tell you what we agree at the organization, and it's that because we know the challenge, we know that this is a transition and that it's going to take several steps and efforts from every single stakeholder of the sector. The organization and the member states agreed that we were going to be fuel agnostic and technology agnostic. So we need to tap on all the opportunities, call it ammonia, methanol, hydrogen-derived fuels, biofuels, etc. And this is where we are right now, as well as the new technologies. We have wind propulsion being further developed, electric power, and that is happening a lot in short sea shipping. So I will not tell you right now that you need to select one particular fuel, because we need all the help that we can get. And this is why there's a lot of research going in the different fuels. The Green Maritime Corridors, one of those activities that it was highlighted this morning, will also provide additional information in relation to trade and where those fuels are going to be required, the quantities, etc. So this is where we are, is gathering all that. At IMO, we've already established the necessary guidelines to do the life cycle assessment of all these fuels, and we're leaving them all on the table. We're doing the necessary evaluation and analysis. But again, we need to be fuel agnostic as well as technology agnostic in order to meet this challenge.
The other question that has appeared in the Slido about decarbonization is the proposal of a carbon levy that's still being debated right now at the IMO, and what you feel is the way ahead in that direction. But at the same time, we worry about continual additional costs for the decarbonization program, and carbon levy is another one. The whole idea being to accelerate and push the industry to move forward faster. But I heard something more positive today from the IALA Secretary General, who says that in his conferences, he has come up with the impression that shipping companies do see a business case for decarbonization, and that could really be the accelerator force, that if a company sees there's a business case, if I'm a first mover on this and that other points, it is a gain for me and my company, rather than just looking at the costs. How much will it cost me to move in that direction? How do you feel talking about promoting a business case for decarbonization can actually help push shipping companies to say, yes, that's where we need to go, and therefore make the IMO job a little easier?
IMO job is not difficult. It's actually interesting. There's a pricing mechanism that we are developing. I know you make reference to a levy. I won't label it. I won't call it a levy, because we have several proposals on the table, and what matters is not labeling what we're going to adopt. It's actually focusing on the benefits and the reasons for adopting a pricing mechanism. And it's the architecture that we're developing right now. And the analysis and the assessments that we're carrying out on any impact, including negative impacts that these measures will take, is what is going to be presented at the meeting of the Marine Environment Protection Committee later on this year. But it's also important to highlight that within this, the different proposals for a pricing mechanism, the representatives from the shipping industry that actually are there, they have been campaigning and they have put this forward, because saving the planet has a cost, and not just for shipping, it's for everyone, it's for society. And it will be, we all have recognized as well, that it will be, the inaction can be more expensive at the end. So we know the challenges. We know that we need the alternative fuels. We know that we have to address the safety aspects of those new fuels, that we also rely on the technology and that we need the training. But these also provide the opportunities. And this is where the business cases become for the shipping companies as well as for the countries. When you start looking at becoming one of those producers of those alternative fuels, what that can do to your national economy, additional workforce that will be required in order for the new logistical actions that will have to take place when those fuels and the new training requirements are there, and the way that we are navigating towards the future. So it is good to be an early mover. For those who actually can be an early mover, I will continue to call upon you to do so and develop those business cases. And the early movers is not just the industry, it's also the countries. Nor we mention it, how they actually have support for the industry in order to move forward in this transition. We need other countries to do that, and support the countries that need the assistance to do that. The same way that the shipping industry, the companies that can move forward, can also share the experience through the organization, so the other ship owners that probably face a larger challenge can also meet those objectives. And this is where we start working in the organizations with every single country in the world, with all the regions, learning from those that can take the first steps, sharing with those that need further assistance, in order for us to start meeting the objectives that we have set up in the strategy all at the same time.
I think that you have also mentioned in many of your speeches the desire for inclusivity in the maritime sector. Inclusivity not just about gender balances, but also inclusivity in the sense that there is this wide group of less developed countries, small island developing states, that feel they might be left behind by all these new changes that are taking place, the new technology developments. How do we try and help these countries cope with all the changes that are taking place now in this, especially during this important transition period? And I have a special interest because as ambassador of the Pacific Island Forum, a lot of these Pacific Island states feel that, how do we deal with this? With all the green corridors that are developing, it's between big ports. We are left out. What can IMO do to help them along the way?
Part of the assessment that we're carrying out right now, in order to the measures that we're introducing for decarbonizing the sector, focusing particularly on small island developing states and least developed countries. And there are small actions that we continue to take, and I hope that others can follow suit. And this is when we start building that trust that we're not going to leave other countries behind. Not by just saying it, but by actually doing things about it. We established a fund at IMO, and several countries continue to donate into this fund. And that is to assist in the participation of small island developing countries and least developed countries into the meetings of the organizations, so their voice can be heard, their concerns can be addressed, and then they can be better understood. At the same time, when we get information, for example, you highlighted the marine corridors. We're not expecting that in some of those small island developing states we're going to build megaports, but it's also what additional type of shipping activities will be required for them and how we can support that. And it's not forgetting that there's opportunities there as well for investment. But in the organization for us is to keep bringing them together. We have several projects when we actually focus on how to highlight not just the challenges, but the opportunities that these countries have. And some of those is in how they protect better the marine ecosystem in order to continue to grow as a society. They can then take from several other parts of their national industries, national sectors that will be supported through shipping and through the protection of the marine environment. So it's looking at what the opportunities are with them and working with them, but not isolating it, and not just treating them as the countries that only need the support, but also the countries that can tap of all these opportunities.
Yeah, and I think you also have the initiative of setting up an IMO office in the Pacific recently. That is a very good initiative.
That's correct. It's going to be in Fiji, and it's soon to open.
Yeah, I'll go and meet those people when I'm next in Fiji. Now, coming back to the level playing field and the fact that we want to see much more participation on the part of all the stakeholders. Coordination, cooperation were a lot of the words that were thrown around at the earlier session. How does IMO engage that in making sure that when you are doing your new strategies and your transitions, how do you ensure that you bring along all the stakeholders, not only the unions, but also the industry, as well as the governments?
is the openness that we have in the meetings of the organizations. All the stakeholders are present there. But we also work in between the sessions. Just because we're not meeting every week to discuss decarbonization on any other important topic at IMO, it doesn't mean that we're not working on it. And this is where the countries in particular, they continue to engage in bilateral and multilateral meetings in between the sessions. We organize as an organization different workshops, technical cooperation activities, meetings in the organization. It's something that I also want to introduce and will continue to work on, is the openness in actually inviting all the stakeholders to come and ask the necessary questions that they have. One of the first actions that I took when I started my role in January was first to have a conversation with all the member states based in London. I called them just to have an open exchange of the priorities for the organization, my priorities for the organizations, and the main topics in the industry. Then, all the IGOs and NGOs that have observer status of the organization. And then I follow that with the media in order to, again, raise the voice that we are here and we're open to any questions, any kind of exchange that could help us highlight all the work that we do, all the work that continues to happen in between the sessions. And one area that I want to work on as well, and I need the support in particular from all the member states in the industry, is again to enhance the way that we carry out our technical cooperation activities and our projects. And it's better assessment to the member states to see what are the needs, engage with other sectors, like the energy sectors, because they need to be part of this transition. And of course, we engage with other UN agencies that then bring other parts, like the International Labour Organizations, and then we can start hearing from the unions as well, the representatives of the seafarers, as well as the ship owners, or what are the challenges that they are facing. But it's this constant communication that we keep open between ourselves and all the member states. And again, just because we're not meeting week in and week out, even though we are, just not always on decarbonization, it doesn't mean that in the corridors, as usual, we are constantly talking to all, trying to understand what are the challenges and preparing for the next conversations.
I think you talked about the need, just talked about the need for how you can make all your processes more transparent and getting more information out there. But the perennial problem for the maritime sector is that it's always hidden. As you said, people don't know how much shipping really keeps the world go round. And so how do we make maritime, with all this transparency, it's all transparency about very technical issues. How do you make the transparency translate into making the maritime sector a more sexy sector, for instance?
I'll leave that quote for you. But this is something that we all need to do together. Transparency, inclusion is one of my key pillars for my tenure as Secretary General. And it's that openness, it's that reaching out to everyone. But I can't do it on my own. I will continue to do it, and I will not be tired of it. But I also need you to do the same thing. Do not hide behind all the successes. Personally, I think that for many years, in the past in particularly, we were very comfortable being in the shadows, just carrying on with our business and probably reacting whenever there was a maritime accident or a casualty, etc. But let's face it, we are more and more on the public eye, and we've been for the last decade or so, particularly since the Green Agenda became one of the most important topics, if not the most important topic for the United Nations and for the whole world. And it's take the opportunities to highlight how good we are. Defend the sector, just as much as I defend the organization and defend the sector. That's why I'm not afraid of saying that IMO is not slow, that we continue to make progress, that we listen, and that I want to speak to everybody, and I will listen to everyone. But you need to help me, because we cannot be passive. I continue to use the example of COVID and how everybody was remembering COVID. And that's what also the no shipping, no shopping was getting, more traction. But then COVID disappears and it starts looking like a cold. And then we just say, so we can put it to one side. And then at the same time, we also put shipping to one side. Until now, that is being affected again. Let's not wait for that. I mean, let's be proud of this industry because we have a lot to be proud of. And you have to speak up. Whenever somebody is criticizing, I'm going to add IMO here, and the shipping industry, speak up. Just let them know how we transport more than 80% of goods around the world. That if without shipping, they probably will not be enjoying the comfort of the mobile phones, the computers, the furniture that they have at home, or just going to, what was the company that we mentioned earlier, Amazon? Can I use Amazon? I shouldn't be promoting anyone. And then just click and deliver the following day. It's shipping. Let's just remember what happened in 2021 when the Ever Given blocked the Suez Canal for 5 days. How the economy of the world suffered. How some of the essential goods could not be transported or reach out to the countries when they need it, and then to you and I. So let's keep that in mind whenever shipping is on the table. And that's what I do. I want to keep shipping on the table all the time, that we're actually talking about the progress that we're making. And also when there's criticism, we need to understand that criticism. If there's areas there that we can do more and we can do better, let's do it. Because for as good as we are, and this is what I like, the slogan from Singapore, we can always be better.
Good, better, best.
Good, better, best. I'll take that back to the IMO for the next meeting.
Well, I think you are right that the shipping the understanding of shipping kind of slides to the background whenever things are going right. But then when something goes wrong, then shipping comes in again. Always a very reactive kind of situation. And here is one reactive question. It says that with what's happening in the Red Sea and all these geopolitical uncertainties, would IMO's focus change from the double D to something else because of the world situation? How do you see that Red Sea incidents and all that political instability in the Middle East affecting your focus and your priorities on shipping?
It is important to acknowledge that geopolitical situations have a negative and can have a negative effect on shipping. Now, IMO is not a political organization. It is a technical organization. But I've always said it, that we need to address any effect that these actions have on shipping. And that's what I've been heavily engaged with on the UN agencies, with all countries of the organization, in order to highlight the importance of sitting down, having those conversations at the agencies that are required or that are more relevant for that, but I'm also having that at the organization, because we need to recognize the challenges that we have. We need to understand what else we can do. There are measures that we have adopted when we were facing piracy off the coast of Somalia, and some of those actions are being utilized right now, but the industry is gathering additional information in order to, for us, at the next session of the Maritime Safety Committee, to address additional advice that we can provide. Mm-hmm. So we need to address the fact that they do have a negative effect on shipping and that we need to face it. It doesn't slow down the work of the organization, if that's what you were alleging to. Our meetings continue to address the heavy workload that we have. And we go from the decarbonization to digitalization, to the human element, autonomous ships, other areas of the environment that we need to address, the polar code, the polar regions, noise pollution, you name it. I mean, facilitation, we just introduced, talking about digitalization, the maritime single window, which is going to support as well the increase or efficiency in the logistics operations between the ship and the port. Singapore has been a very supportive country in this. We've had partnership between Singapore and Angola, for example, for their establishment of the maritime single window. So the work of the organization doesn't slow down. We need to acknowledge the geopolitical situations, have those conversations, because we need to provide our input and our comment if how that can help, in any case, find a solution that we all want, so shipping can go back to continue to trade as usual. But I can tell you and I can guarantee the work of the organization will continue.
Right. I think it's now time to give him a question that kind of rounds up his vision and priorities for his term in the IMO. I'm sure it will be a double term. But how do you think the maritime industry will be like in 5 to 10 years? What do you see would be the main areas of change? What do you hope will be your legacy at the end of your term here as Secretary General?
I think it will be too easy if I focus on meeting the challenges of decarbonization that we have set up, because I am convinced that we're going to meet those objectives. The first one's coming in 2030. But what I actually want to bring to the industry, what I want to see the shipping industry, is that it's ready to change, and it actually changes, that is more proactive, that is actually more visible, more energetic and ambitious as well. In understanding all the challenges that we have, we can always move forward. We want an industry, that we talked about it, that is more transparent and is more inclusive, as well as more diverse. Because the whole stigma that because we're a very technical sector and it's a very male-dominated, it's more difficult for it to be more inclusive and more diverse, I don't believe that. And I have an example, the way that, you talked about my career, but I always also admire your career and the way that you continue to, progress and invent yourself. And now, I remember when you were the ambassador to Panama.
Yes.
Now it's to the Pacific Islands.
Yes.
I mean, you continue to take those challenges on board. And that's what I want, an industry that is actually very open and welcoming. We started last year already by streamlining the first session of the IMO Assembly to the public. And I want the public to see all those benefits. But again, I may not see all the changes by the end, that we have, gender balance, that we're fully able to, based on cost as well as the challenges that we sometimes introduce in technology in the organization, that all our meetings are actually followed, that the public is more aware of how important shipping is, that we are ready to change, because this transition into a more digitalized and decarbonized sector as well as autonomous means that we have to change even the way we trade. There will be new fuels, new people. And that's what I want, that we continue to be proactive, that we continue to be energetic, and that shipping is not just sitting there waiting to be criticized, but it's actually up from there demonstrating that whenever we talk about sustainability, efficiency, and quality, we're at the top.
Well, there you go. We have not only a Secretary General ready to go to put actions into ambitions, but also with a far-ranging positive agenda of making IMO give its mark to the shipping industry. So I would like, on this count, to request you to give your thanks to Arsenio for a wonderful session, and I'm sure we look forward to working with him into the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arsenio Dominguez and Ambassador Mary C. Cheng. I'd like to invite you to come forward for a group photo, please. What a delightful chat, and I'm sure we will be talking about it over lunch as well. Yes, please. A couple of steps forward. Just a couple more photos. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.